Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to the Coffee, Health, and Science Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in again today. Before we get started, as always, I urge you to share the show. Tell a friend about the Coffee, Health, and Science Podcast. Today we have allergy expert, intolerance expert, and food intolerance, that is, and so much more. Dr. Layton is back on the line. How you doing, Dr. Layton?
I'm doing fine. Glad to be back.
Thank you for coming back. We always appreciate you coming on the show, enlightening us on all things sensitivity, allergies, intolerances, and more. Today we are covering lactose. We're covering cheese and milk and cream. And this is big in the coffee world because a lot of people like to add milk and cream to their coffee, but a lot of people can't. So I'm just going to set you up, Dr. Layton. I know that lactose intolerance is a pretty big part of what you do. Can you just dive right into what lactose is, why people struggle with it, and what we can do about it?
Okay. Lactose is a sugar. Lactase is an enzyme to digest lactose. So individuals who have a lactose intolerance do not have enough lactase, the enzyme, to digest the sugar lactose.
Makes sense.
Okay. Now, next, I just want to cover who is affected, and it's extremely common. Really anyone, but especially the older population, Asian, Hispanic, African American, and Jewish. So it's really mostly anyone.
Wow. What percentages of, just any given population are affected by lactose intolerance of some kind?
Yeah, I looked this up, but the general thinking is that in the United States, it's over 30% of the population.
Whoa.
And worldwide, over 75%.
Wow.
So really common.
That is fascinating. I wonder if that has to do anything with, I guess you said it's across the board, because I imagined, maybe if your ancestors did a lot of agriculture and sedentary farming and consumed a lot of these dairy products from cattle, maybe that would help, but it kind of sounds like it's all across the board.
Just seems to be anyone.
Wow.
Can possibly have it.
So lactase deficiency is kind of what you would define this as. Is there any way to supplement lactase, or is that not a thing?
Not really. The way to treat it, if it is a problem, is to take Lactaid, dairy yeast. There's one called Lactrace. So taking these, it says to take it with the lactose food. I personally think it should be 10 to 15 minutes before, and there's really no side effects I'm aware of. If necessary, even though I haven't read this anywhere, I don't see any harm in taking a second one right at the time.
Wow.
But I would give it 10 to 15 minutes rather than giving it a chance to work rather than taking it with that. Just didn't make a lot of sense to me. I could be wrong, but that's what I think.
Wow, that's fascinating. I had heard of those medications, and at first I was going to say, maybe it's time to change your diet, but you're saying these are very benign medications.
Yes.
Wow.
It's really considered a supplement and easily available.
Whoa, that is fascinating. See, I don't suffer from this. I'm really grateful that I don't suffer from this. I love cheese. I hope it never changes.
You've been blessed.
But please go on.
One other thing, the primary, where what I mentioned is not enough lactase, is called primary problem with lactose intolerance. The secondary is when there's injury or inflammation, endoinflammation to the gastrointestinal tract. So medical conditions, including inflammatory bowel disease, which is Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, celiac. Those individuals are more likely to have problems digesting foods containing lactose.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's fascinating. So there's kind of two classifications of the lactose intolerance.
There's other ones, but they're pretty rare.
Primary,
congenital. Yeah.
And that almost sounds more serious, the way you talk about the inflammation and relation to these diseases.
Well, these are individuals who are already dealing with major issues, so
I see.
It's all a matter of relevance. If someone has celiac, they're not really worried I would think about lactose. It's just another thing, but not even be able to eat gluten, and that's a bigger problem. So it's all what you have and how
I
you
see
deal
what
with
you
it.
mean. I do see
Yeah.
what you mean. As far as symptoms, I mean, we all know upset stomach and gastrointestinal problems, but we've had you on the show before talk about the wide effect of these types of intolerances and allergies. Talk to us about lactose
Yeah.
intolerance symptoms.
Well, I'm going to compare lactose intolerance to a milk intolerance with the protein casein. Now, with lactose intolerance, it is only the gastrointestinal tract. So, Jordan, you already mentioned the primary symptoms, the main one being diarrhea, but also bloating, gas, cramping are the main problems. How quickly can it happen? It can be right away. It can be up to 2 hours. My experience clinically is it's usually within the 15 minutes of someone not being able to tolerate a food with lactose.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's different degrees or severity of, and I call it a threshold. So some individuals will have a very low threshold with just eating a piece of cheese or half a piece of cheese, and others have a very high threshold where it takes something like a very thick milkshake to set off the gastrointestinal symptoms.
Ah, I see.
So some can eat cheese and others can only have a glass of milk. So there are variations of this, and those who have a severe problem already know it.
That is bizarre to me, though. So
Yeah.
it's almost like a reaction, a trigger that's set off. And like you said, for some people, it's just the tiniest little slice of cheese, and then other people they have to drink that whole milkshake. Well, that's just bizarre. They have enough lactase to handle this, but not that, or is it more of like a trigger and a reaction?
I think it depends on the individual and how much lactase, the enzyme, they have to break down lactose. So that's probably the variable.
Okay.
That's what makes sense to me anyway. I haven't seen or read it anywhere, but it's just more common sense that would be the cause. Now, in contrast, someone who has a problem with casein, and milk contains the protein casein as well as lactose, well, those symptoms can be head to toe. And as I mentioned in a previous podcast, headaches, attention span affected, asthma, allergic eczema, fatigue in adults, hyperactivity in children, mood, sleep, nasal symptoms, joint pain. And there are others, but those are the main ones. Whereas a lactose intolerance is much less. It's only the gastrointestinal tract, which isn't good for a coffee lover.
Yes, that is true. The casein, though, wow, sounds like it can be a real problem. This is just a naturally occurring protein in what? All milks? Goat milk, cow's milk, doesn't matter?
No, it's not in almond, coconut, soy, rice. I don't know how you pronounce this. Kefir, some say kefir, some say kefir. Those are the primary milks that do not contain casein. Cow's milk does. Goat milk, some people can tolerate the amount of casein. At least the children with autism I took care of who had problems with casein where it actually had patients affected their language. That when I put them on a casein-free diet and then a gluten-free diet, it's probably the best intervention I had for autistic children who had language issues.
Wow,
So
casein being the problem, and and they were able to handle a little bit of goat's milk in that case, or no?
Some could handle some goat milk, but primarily I recommended almond, coconut. Rice is not really nutritious, but children as well as especially children, but even adults can be finicky with what they eat. Soy used to be a big time positive food. It's not anymore. It hasn't been for several decades probably, but at one time it was considered a good food. It's not.
Funny how
so
that works.
that would be the lactose free options for instead avoiding cow's milk.
Nice. And I know oat milk is now big as well. But yeah, you've been practicing medicine long enough to see, for instance,
Yeah, I missed that one. Oat milk is good.
You've been practicing medicine long enough to see, soy milk coming on the scene as this great alternative, and then we find out it's this endocrine disruptor, and it's really not that great. And now
No, no.
now people don't talk so much about soy milk. It's funny how that works.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't sleep on the goat's milk. I was trying to look up this wonderful brand out of Wisconsin that I do enjoy. It's not the Mayenberg, but it comes in a purple bottle, and I'll follow up. I do enjoy the goat's milk. Is it about the quality of dairy in any way? Like, and furthermore, well, let me just start there. Is it about the quality of dairy?
It's really the type of dairy that's the issue with lactose.
And it's going to be present no matter how high quality, no matter how farm fresh it is.
Yeah, if it's cow's milk, it's going to have lactose in it.
So then let me ask you this. Do you even consider these types of products, milks and cheeses, part of a healthy diet? We've had your colleagues on, people like Dr. Kevin Chan from Pineapple Health, come on and say that, dairy used to be a core part of our food pyramid, and it's really just not that good for us and not necessary. Other people say, the raw stuff is good. I know you're not a nutritionist, but do you consider dairy even a healthy part of our diet anymore?
I'm not a big fan. I would say for those individuals who have no symptoms, it's okay.
Right.
But the way to do this is, with the kids who have behavioral and or developmental issues, is removing all, we weren't going to talk about casein, but I can't help it, I'm big on it. Taking casein out for 1 month and then seeing what improvements there are, and then adding it back as a challenge. But in a young child who has behavioral and or developmental language issues, difficult children, sleep, it's good to try an elimination diet with a casein-free diet.
Whoa. Fascinating. See this lactose episode, and then we have this whole other exploration here. I'm going to be doing some casein research when we get off.
And just put things in perspective, Dr. Frank Oskey, who was the chairman of the Johns Hopkins Hospital Department of Pediatrics, a fantastic hematologist, and really ran his department well in the 1960s. He wrote a book around 1960, Don't Drink Your Milk. So for someone who's so academic to write a book about it,
wow.
Lends a lot of credence to what I'm saying. So I would say for those who are okay with it, okay. But if you're not sure, take it out of your diet and see. And lactose would be what we're talking about today, but it might spread further than that with milk in general.
Yes, with the dreaded casein. Anything else here before we move into, we could talk about alternatives before we wrap it up here?
The lactose elimination diet, there's different ways to determine if you have a lactose problem. And as I've mentioned before, I consider elimination diet to be the gold standard in determining food allergies and sensitivities. Mm-hmm. And where I read you should eliminate it for 2 weeks, a week is enough, and then adding it back to determine your level of intolerance. So if you want to see if you can tolerate certain amounts, and this would certainly apply to your audience, adding it to your coffee would be number one for this group. Milk, 1/4 cup, then 1/2 cup, and see what you tolerate. Hard cheeses may be able to be tolerated. Yogurt. So it's not only a lactose intolerance, it's how severe is the lactose intolerance.
Right. Finding that threshold, like you said.
And then there's a test called a breath test, which measures hydrogen in the small intestine, which is given off by lactose. I don't think this test is even necessary for this. The elimination diet and just observation is a much
better tool.
Much better approach. yeah,
Totally. Yeah. I know you had talked about scratch tests in the past too, and how really it just comes down to trying it and each person incorporating that lifestyle change. I hadn't heard about that hydrogen detection test though. That is pretty fascinating.
Well, it's a test used for what's called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial organisms. So individuals who have gastrointestinal complaints, they see a gastroenterologist. This breath test can determine if they have SIBO. It doesn't always result in a good result with the treatment, but that's what it's generally used for. But you can also get an answer of lactose. I just think the elimination diet is something that can be done without seeing a doctor.
Right. And you mentioned hard cheeses. I had heard that exact same thing, kind of the aged, really, really enzyme. I mean, maybe it's because there's so many enzymes in there. I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah.
Those tend to be tolerated better. You mentioned all the milk alternatives. There's also a cheese that's created that is lactose free. It's a type of cheese. It's not even a cheese substitute, but I'm trying to look it up. It's a type of cheese, and the way that it's created, I know this for a fact. I cannot find it.
You have me on this one, so that makes sense. And I would add here that it's very important when you're shopping to look on labels, because, and I can give a list of how many foods may contain lactose if you want me to, but it's all, I'd say one of the more important things I'm saying is read labels, look closely for lactose, because it's in so many foods. It's in a lot of medications.
Whoa. So it's beyond, again, it's finding the compounds that you're sensitive to.
That's right.
That is a good point. Yeah, I will find this cheese. I will follow up. I saw it at Ream's Bakery down in Elburn, Illinois. Maybe it's more rare than I thought. It looks like Munster clocking in at the lowest lactose, 0 to 1.1% range.
Yeah.
I'll follow up on another episode. Folks.
That's good information. Let me just mention the foods. The ones that are obvious are milk, cheese, ice cream, butter, margarine, artificial sweeteners. Maybe it's not that well-known, yogurt, but it's also in medications. It can be in these foods: sherbet, baked goods, salad dressing, instant oatmeal, granola, cereal, processed grains, crackers, potato chips, soups, rice and noodle mixes, hot dogs, cold cuts, bacon, sausages, candy, pancakes, waffles, biscuits, cookie mixes, creamy alcoholic beverages. So again, if there's one thing you take out of this is read labels, because that's the way to avoid it.
Wow. 100%. Chips, sour cream and onion chips. I just had to punch in a couple things in Google as you were listing that. I had no idea that lactose was found in such a wide variety of products. And that does make sense that it's going to be found in things like sour cream and onion potato chips having lactose.
Right.
Jeez.
But it's not in coffee.
Not in coffee. That is a good point to wrap it up here. You know, we always talk about treating your coffee like a medicinal brew. Drinking it black is a great option. There are some things that fat and milk and dairy does to coffee. It increases that fat level, obviously, if that's good for your metabolism. It also keeps your coffee warmer for longer. If you pour 2 cups of coffee and leave one black and add just room temperature milk to the other, the one with milk will actually stay warmer for longer because of the heat retention. Couple interesting points there, but you're right. There's no lactose in coffee, so drink up and have it black. Dr. Layton, this was an awesome exploration. Anything else here before we wrap it up, or does that about cover it?
I think that covers it. I like to give my email if somebody has questions about this topic or anything.
Love it.
With dealing with allergies and food problems, etc. It's Dickey, D-I-C-K, all lowercase, D-I-C-K-I-E, Layton, L-A-Y-T-O-N @gmail.com. And I will answer you.
I love that. Absolutely love that, Dr. Layton. And thank you, listeners. I know you enjoyed another enlightening episode with the great Dr. Layton. This is Jordan River, and you know who, Dr. Richard Layton, signing off saying, have an extraordinary day. We'll see you next time on the Coffee, Health, and Science Podcast.